Hi everyone, my dad recently bought me an amazing gift. It is the Book of Llandaff as a historical source by Patrick Sims Williams. Now you might be thinking, Caleb, why is that important? Well, the reason why it was such a cool gift is because the Book of Llandaff as a historical source delves into, surprisingly enough, the Book of Llandaff, which is a collection of records about land grants made by the kings of Southeast Wales to various bishops who were active in that area. So it's amazingly useful to see who was a contemporary of whom and who was the son of who and all sorts of things like that. So which bishops were contemporary with which kings and so on. It's very useful for that, but it doesn't give any, or at least the early part doesn't provide any absolute dates. But because of the detail in all these charters and the witness lists and everything, you can create a fairly secure relative chronology. But the absolute chronology is in question, or it's open to question. So the Book of Llandaff as a historical source delves into the details as to why the conventional chronology is what it is. Because in my opinion, the conventional chronology is off by about 100 years. That's very important to me because I believe that the historical King Arthur was a figure known as Atheros, son of Myric. He was part of this dynasty in southeast Wales. So the chronology of this dynasty is very important in assessing whether this theory has any validity. And also it's just important in general in understanding what really happened with southeast Wales after the Romans left. So in this book that I got as a gift, it has extensive amounts of detail, information that you would just never be able to find online about the evidence in favor of the conventional chronology. So I haven't read it all yet. There's a lot of detail to go through. However, I have had a bit of a look so far, and what I've found is, well, I've already found a very interesting bit of evidence which I wanted to share with you. An evidence which really is not evidence for the late chronology, the mainstream chronology for this dynasty, but in reality it's evidence for the bias, the academic bias that goes into researching this subject. Now, if you've watched my videos before, you'll know that I do not say that lightly. I don't think I have ever actually said that there's bias in the analysis of any particular subject that I've spoken about. I like to, just keep things free from accusation and everything. I don't like to accuse anyone of anything. And, if I disagree with an academic about something, it's simply a disagreement. That's all there is to it. But this, I'm saying, is a very clear evidence of genuine bias in the investigation of this subject. Let me explain why. So Patrick Sims Williams, on page 51, if you have the book, page 51, he explains that the late 11th century Life of St. David records David curing the blindness of King Pebior. Pebior was one of the kings in the line to Atheros. So obviously I'm not saying this actually happened, but it helps us to see when they were believed to have lived, because the Annals Cambriae, which is the Welsh Annals, the chronicle of events in Wales from the 10th century, that records the death of David as being in 601. So Patrick Sims Williams points out, he makes a point of saying that this was the St. David's view, St. David's being a place in southwest Wales, named after the religious figure David. So according to the Annals Cambriae, written in that area, David died in 601. And according to the Life of St. David, which was also written in that area, and this is what Patrick Sims Williams makes a point of, that they both came from the same area, so this was the St. David's view, David was a contemporary of Pebior. So if David died in about 601, and he was a contemporary of King Pebior, then, according to that view, St. David's view, Pebior must have been a roughly late 6th century king. That's his argument on page 51. And he makes a point of the fact that the Annals Cambriae comes from the same region as where the life of St. David was written. So this was the view, the St. David's view. But there's a very clear, very, very strikingly shocking almost flaw in this logic. In the exact same document that Patrick Sims Williams uses to support a supposed late 6th century view, late 6th century reign for Pebior, in that same document, the Annals Cambriae, we have not only the death of David, but we also have his birth. And his birth is placed in the 450s. So think about that. If David was born in the 450s, or believed to have been born in the 450s, because remember, Patrick Sims Williams here isn't really concerned about what actually happened, he's concerned about the St. David's view, because it was in St. David's where this document, The Life of St. David, was written, where David is presented as a contemporary of Pebior. So he's not concerned necessarily with what actually happened, but with what people in that time, in that area, believed. So you have not just the death of David, but the birth of David. So if David was believed to have been born in the 450s, then he could have been performing miracles as an adult by the 470s. And Pebior could have been an old king. Even if it wasn't an old king, that would still place him in the 400s. But he could have been an old king. He could have been 80 years old when this interaction between him and David happened. So in reality, I mean, if he was 80 years old, he could have been born in the 300s. And that would still accommodate very easily what this document, The Life of St. David, says about him. And it's not easy to miss this reference to the birth of St. David in the Annals Cambriae. It's not an obscure reference. It's the only other bit of information about David in that chronicle. So why would Patrick Sims Williams just focus on the death of David in that chronicle and completely ignore the birth of David? He can't have missed it. It could only be due to a desire to ignore that bit of evidence, because that would reveal the fact that actually this supposed interaction between David and Pebior is perfectly compatible with Pebior being a thoroughly 5th century king rather than a 6th, certainly rather than a late 6th century king. That could only have been willing. It could only have been intentional. So that's what I found so far. For me, honestly, that was pretty shocking to see. And I'm sure that, I hope that as I look through the rest of it, I don't find any other examples of such blatantly misrepresented evidence. And hopefully the rest of it will just be, as in all my other videos, just different, perfectly sincere, different evaluations of the evidence. Nothing so ingenuous. But we'll see, and I'll keep you updated, and I look forward to looking through the rest of the book.